We'll examine all of the legal challenges against Donald Trump's executive orders, plus Giorgio Tsoukalos, the aliens guy, will join us on today's episode of the podcast.
It's the show.
Hey there. How y'all doing? Thank you for finding the Scott Sand Show podcast. We're available now on Spotify, Amazon, I believe, on Apple, YouTube, Facebook, X. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Much appreciated. Not making any money from this, by the way, but I do have things to say. Tiger, the producer, about to make a cameo appearance. I'm not going to... It's his tail. I'm not going to start the recording again. But I will let him down. Look it down. Sometimes I think some of you tune in just to see if Tiger the cat makes a cameo appearance. Whatever the reason why you tune in, it's much appreciated. This is episode 2550 of the Scott Sand Show. Let's get underway. Friday, by the way, I'll be back on Super Talk Mississippi at supertalk.fm from 11 to 2 Eastern Time. Friday is also opening day for the Mud Hens, so I'm going to miss out on some of the pregame parties, which is disappointing, but I gotta pull in a little bit of a check to help pad the severance. And of course, I'll mention this again because I'm not making any money from this. Please, this is not to replace the old radio show. I hope you'll continue to listen to Fred and everybody on WSPD and continue to support the local advertisers, as well as the partners of this podcast. As you can see, I'm wearing a Rixa Health hoodie, and I was able to size down on hoodies thanks to Rixa Health. Been on the program like 15 months now. I've lost 100 pounds, and I'm maintaining that weight. I'm going to try for another 25 pounds before the end of the summer. Also, thanks to Mike and Jamie at 4 Guys on a Roof, the extreme roofer at 4guysonaRoof.com, Farnsworth Cocktail Bar. Go see Josh and have some delicious oysters, 3rd Street Cigar, all of our other wonderful partners, which I'll mention throughout the show today. As you've probably heard by now, boxing legend George Foreman passed away on Friday at age 76. No word yet on the cause of death there, which kind of sucks because who's going to be the next challenger to Jake Paul? Who's he going to fight next? Foreman, a 2-time world champion and Olympic gold medalist, famously made a comeback in 1987 at the age of 38 and may have been just as well known as the spokesman for the infamous George Foreman Grill. One of his big fights, this is legendary. Howard Cosell on the call here.
Frazier, quite understandably the favorite. Foreman comes out punching with the right. Historically, Frazier has not been a good first-round fighter. Oh, Foreman connected. I think he hurt Joe Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. The heavyweight champion is taking the mandatory 8 count, and Foreman is as poised as can be. Foreman is all over Joe Frazier. Frazier is down again, and he may be. No, he is rising. He doesn't know where he is. The mandatory 8 count. Now the round is about to end. Down again. No saving by the bell. Round 2. Oh, he is all over Frazier again. Frazier's knees buckled. He is down for the 4th time in the fight. A quick left from George. Another. Frazier is down for the 5th time in this fight. It's target practice for George Foreman. Frazier is ready to go again. Joe is standing. There he goes. The fight is stopped. No, it is not. It is not stopped. Angie Dundee is screaming, stop it. It is over. It is over in the 2nd round. George Foreman is the heavyweight champion of the world.
There is nobody better on the call than Howard Cosell, and an exciting fight for George Foreman. He was married 5 times, had 12 kids, 5 sons who were all named George. Yeah, that's true. 7 daughters. One of the girls named Georgetta. Mike Tyson tweeting out that Foreman's, quote, contribution to boxing and beyond will never be forgotten, nor will his contribution to easy cooking in the kitchen with the Phil Foreman grill.
Hi, I'm George Foreman, and this is my lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine. I've really gotten popular on Madison Avenue. We've done Doritos, McDonald's, and Meineke. Every commercial there was, we made a lot of money. People would pay you a lot of money to do a commercial. But then after a period of time, they move on to someone else. And finally, a friend of mine said, George, you're making all these other companies wealthy. Why don't you get your own product? And we looked around and found the grill. No one wanted to be bothered with it at all. They had names for it, jokes for it. But I took it and they said, try that. And I didn't want to use it, but my wife insisted. She said, it works, George. And the grease really rolled off and it's still tender. I ate it. I said, boy, let's do it. I never expected it to be so successful. And then all of a sudden, the checks just started rolling in. This thing sold over 100 million.
You end up being bought out for something like $140 million. At one point, checks were coming in for upwards of like $4 million monthly.
$5 million.
Yeah. The Foreman grill. I've used one. I've still got one. I haven't used it in a long time. I think my air fryer probably replaced the Foreman grill, but it's easy to cook, and it did just let the fat just drip right out of the meat. You couldn't beat a Foreman chicken breast or steak. I should pull mine down and use it again. It's official, by the way. Tiger Woods is dating Donald Trump Jr.'s ex-wife, Vanessa. They made it Instagram official over the weekend. A couple of photos posted to Tiger's Instagram account asking for privacy at this time, which is what you do. I mean, I get it. I understand the rationale behind posting the pictures before paparazzi could snap a photo and charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for the first picture, the exclusive picture. And also, I got to think, is an opportunity for Kai Trump to really dramatically improve her golf game. Not that she's a slouch at this point anyway. March Madness continues. Sweet 16 brackets have been set. Those rounds began Thursday and Friday with some great games. I mean, I think the first couple of rounds had a lot of blowouts, and we were probably disappointed that there was no real Cinderella story that emerged. Obviously, McNeese State and their first-round victory. Colorado State had a big win. But because of NIL and the transfer portal, I think it's hard for these mid-major schools to have that Cinderella run into the Sweet 16 anymore. And I think that with only 4 conferences being represented now in the Sweet 16, it might be time maybe for mid-majors to have their own tournament so they can extend their season a little bit. I hate to think that way. I would love to see mid-majors continue to thrive and excel in the NCAA tournament, but it's hard to compete at that level now with all of the NIL money that's out there. It's hard for a team like Akron or Kent State or Toledo to be able to beat an Auburn, an Alabama, a Florida, a Michigan State. I am happy as an SEC guy to have 7 SEC teams represented in the Sweet 16, including, of course, my Alabama Crimson Tide. I've got one bracket that's an all-SEC bracket. It's not doing as well as my other brackets, but I did it just to piss off all of my Big Ten friends, just in case it did succeed. But it's really not. It's the worst performing bracket that I've got out of my 4. I know egg prices have been high. They're coming down under Donald Trump, but I didn't realize they were this high. CNN says next month's White House Easter egg roll will include corporate branding for the first time. The annual event, a tradition on the South Lawn since 1878. This is not, despite what some people on social media will claim, is not the first time it's said any type of sponsor. The American Egg Board donates the eggs every year, and others kick in money to avoid using taxpayer money. But it's the first time you'll be able to pay to have your logo prominently displayed. I don't know, like the Tostitos Easter egg roll. An event company hired by the White House sent out a 9-page document offering different branding opportunities ranging in price from $75,000 to $200,000. You could pay for things like naming rights for key areas or elements, logos featured on event signage, and custom branded Easter baskets. As always, people online are split. Some think making money off of it is wrong, especially with kids involved. Others think, it's just a silly event, so you might as well make a few bucks. All of the money that's raised from these sponsorships will go to the White House Historical Association nonprofit that works to educate people on the history of the White House, and will also pay for official presidential portraits, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw the tweet from Truth Social from Donald Trump. He's upset about the portrait of his that's hanging on some government buildings in Colorado. He calls it unflattering and the worst portrait ever. You can see his Truth Social and see the portrait. I got to tell you, he's really not wrong about that. It is a horrible portrait of him. Big story last week on social media. A group of researchers claim they found a massive city and huge vertical shafts buried under the pyramids in Egypt. Some experts are very skeptical about it, but we'll discuss with ancient astronaut theorist and host of Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, Giorgio Tsoukalos, who will join us in just a few minutes. But first, I want to talk about these legal challenges to some of President Trump's executive orders. Jay Town is former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, and he's joining me now on the Scott Sands Show podcast. Jay, it's always great to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
So President Trump is enduring quite a number of legal challenges since taking office again. I think I saw a record number of 65 legal challenges to his executive orders, not to mention the other legal issues that he is facing. The Alien Enemies Act, dismantling USAID, workforce reduction at the federal level, the crisis at the southern border, gender identity, energy, oil drilling. I mean, the list goes on and on. It seems to me like Democrats are trying to run out the clock on his 4-year term.
Yeah, well, this is just lawfare by other means. They tried to run out the clock on his freedom, his fortune, and indeed his life over the last really 8 years, but certainly the last 4 years. And this is just lawfare by other means. This is really what this is, and I'm astounded that more people on the left and the right are not completely upset and up in arms about this attack on the Article 2 powers of the President of the United States. This is nothing short of an attack on Article 2 and all of the powers that Congress has either delegated or the Constitution bestows upon the Commander-in-Chief. And you mentioned the Alien Enemies Act. It's a 230-year-old law. It was written by the founders of this country, who wrote an even older law, which is the Articles of Confederation, Article 2 of the Constitution. They knew full well what powers they were delegating to the president. And in this case, where they don't define what an invasion or a predatory incursion is, they knew that was the job of the commander-in-chief. Trump has done that. He's intertwined the Venezuelan government with Tren de Aragua gang members and others. And he's done so because they're financially supported by Venezuelan government, Maduro's government. They are involved in government in Venezuela and law enforcement and the military. And they have been sent here by Maduro to sow discord in either public safety or violence, or to bring as much cocaine into this country as they possibly can. This is a foreign terrorist organization, according to the President of the United States, TDA, and they're here operating. If this was Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or ISIS or Hamas, I can't imagine that we would still be suffering these same ridiculous lawsuits and before these same ridiculous judges. But here we are, Scott.
It's interesting because an overwhelming number of Americans voted for President Trump to secure our border and reduce crime, make our streets safer. And he's doing that by deporting these gang members and illegals who are in this country back to where they came. The ACLU says it argues against, it violates due process and equal protection, but it really is a national security measure.
It was 100% a national security measure. He wouldn't be able to do this with, for instance, Irish immigrants unless he were able to tie them to a foreign government that is operating here under the purpose of invasion or predatory incursion, or if Congress had declared war. But he's doing this with an organization that his executive order, I believe on day one, labeled the cartels and Tren de Aragua and other terrorist organizations as FTOs, added them to the list. And then once he intertwined them with the government of Venezuela, calling them a hybrid criminal nation, he was able to invoke the AEA, which he has done here properly. There's a reason why this law has been on the books for 230 years and never overturned. Congress has never touched it. They've never bothered to define what a predatory incursion or an invasion is. That's because they well know and fully expect the chief executive, the president of the United States, to be in the best position to make those determinations. The ACLU is not in that position. Judge Boasberg is not in that position. Even the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals and the D.C. Circuit, they're not in that position. In fact, we've elected one person to be in that position. That's Donald Trump.
So it is a 230-year-old law, but it's on the books for a specific reason. Where does this case go from here? It seems like unelected judges are trying to make their own foreign policy under this president.
Yeah, and Boasberg even had the nerve to mention this is just a dangerous policy in arguments before him last Friday. What he thinks was dangerous or what he thinks about a policy is not his job as a judge. His job is to simply apply the law to whatever a government agency is doing. And he just doesn't like what they're doing. It has nothing to do with the law itself. So all of this is perfectly legal. Let me offer you one more thing on Judge Boasberg in this particular case. This is a habeas petition. It's really a poor man's class action suit cloaked under the extraordinary writ of habeas corpus. A habeas petition can only be heard by a court in the jurisdiction where a person is detained. The 5 plaintiffs in the ACLU case in front of Boasberg, 1 is in New York, 4 are in Texas. He doesn't even have jurisdiction to hear this case. And the fact that the only irreparable harm is their removal from the United States, even if he were able to hear this case, the D.C. Circuit has already said that removal from the United States by an illegal immigrant cannot be the irreparable harm that is necessary to issue a temporary restraining order or an injunction. President Obama litigated that issue and he won.
So it seems to me like in some of these cases, Jay, that opponents of President Trump are judge shopping. They're looking for members of the bench who will be favorable to their challenges to Donald Trump's executive orders.
Yeah, they don't want to go to northern New York, the Buffalo area that's more conservative. They don't want to go to Texas for sure and draw a judge down there that's just going to toss the case. They want to go to D.C. And Judge Boasberg wasn't even, the interesting thing is, Scott, is, there's this, there's these what we call duty judges. Every district in the country has them. And when there's an emergency filing, who's the duty judge? And that's who we go to and we file it in their courtroom. Judge Boasberg was not the duty judge in D.C. when this is filed in this emergent complaint. He's the chief judge of the district. He had somebody else as the duty judge, but he decided he wanted to hear this case because only he could determine who should be in the United States and whether or not foreign terrorists organization members should remain here under his watch. And then I want the manifests. I want to know what was the in-flight movie. I want to know everything I can know about those flights that left after I issued my oral order and then had a written order that didn't even mention the oral order or reference it whatsoever or any of the terms of the turn the planes around. And apparently my authority doesn't end at the water's edge. Well, you know what? Supreme Court has already determined that it has. When they're in foreign airspace, international waters, they are deemed removed. That has been litigated by federal courts for a long time and is longstanding precedent. This is just a judge that doesn't like Donald Trump, doesn't like what he's doing. I'm sure he doesn't like Tren de Aragua gang members either. I'm not suggesting he does, but he's not following the law, and he took an oath to do that, and that should matter.
Well, he's challenging Donald Trump just because it's Donald Trump. He's probably also mad if they serve peanuts on the flight instead of pretzels because, God forbid, one of the gang members might be allergic to peanuts.
Right. And there'd be an injunction enjoining the government from serving peanuts because people in Venezuela at 2% of the time have a peanut allergy. And so he's putting people's, and this is how, the fact that we're joking about it, but kind of could see how something as ridiculous as that could happen, Scott, is why we know this is lawfare, just lawfare by other means.
We're talking to Jay Town, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama. Obviously, Jay, we're not going to have time to go into all of these legal challenges. But the other one I think is important is the challenge, the TRO, the temporary restraining order on Donald Trump to dismantle USAID and to reduce the federal workforce. That's another big reason why Donald Trump won re-election is we wanted to cut the bureaucracy. We want to save money. We want to cut federal spending. And I think many of us are upset with where our aid money is going. That's not to say that in some cases, Doge and Elon Musk has not recommended some cuts with a machete instead of a scalpel. I think there is certainly opportunity to roll back some of this funding, some of the grants that actually do good, but that should be under presidential authority, under state authority, and not under judicial authority.
Not only is it under presidential authority, it's under the authority of the language in the grants and in the contracts themselves. I deal with federal contracts every day. Every single grant that is issued by the federal government and every contract issued by the federal government says that those contracts and those grants can be terminated by the United States without cause, just because they feel like it. They don't have to continue to spend money on whatever it is that the previous administration wanted to spend money on if the president, in this case, determines that that grant or that contract doesn't go towards the policy objectives of the executive branch. It does. Now, does President Trump have to spend the $20 billion allotted to the State Department by September 30th? Otherwise, it's considered an impoundment, which we're not still sure if that's constitutional or not. Probably is. Sure. But he can dish out other grants. He can sign other contracts. He can spend that money in other ways. Just because a grant was issued 5 years ago to folks who are in charge of the drag queen story hour in Ghana doesn't mean that Trump has to, well, I guess if we're doing it, we just got to keep doing it. That's just not how it works. It's not the terms of the grant. As far as cutting personnel, everybody who's worked for the government for less than 2 years all know they can be terminated without cause. And so a lot of the fat that was being trimmed was folks that had just been hired by the Biden administration in order to sort of plant them further into the deep state, which is a real thing I didn't believe in until I worked at a high level in the federal government. And Trump saying, no, the law says we can get rid of them. And if you have a problem with that, you can go through the procedures in the Administrative Procedures Act, through the Performance Review Board, and you can contest it. But you can't enjoin me from doing what I want in my agencies. And just one more thing. There is no line item in the federal budget for USAID. There might be a couple of programs that the government says you should use some of the monies allotted to the State Department to do these things. That's fine. You could use $1, you could use $1 billion. That's up to the State Department. But there's not a line item for each one of these programs that USAID has been funding. That's not how the federal budget works. DOD is the closest to that, and even then, those P&E lines are pretty broad. So there's nothing in the law that suggests that the president can't do exactly what he's doing. He should keep doing it. They knew these injunction lawsuits were going to come, or these TROs. They knew they were going to be judge shopped and forum shopped, and they've had a strategy and a plan. What's going to happen, Scott, is they are going to end up in front of the Supreme Court, and the Article 2 powers under Salas law and some of these other cases that really burgeon the personnel and spending efforts by the chief executive. This Supreme Court, I do believe, is going to once and for all state that this is the president's prerogative. These are political questions. Congress, if you don't like it, impeach him for not funding Drag Queen Story Hour in Ghana. Otherwise, don't appropriate the monies to the State Department next year without an absolute line item. Oh, you can't do that because it's not politically expedient to fund Drag Queen Story Hour in Ghana? Well, then stop complaining. It's just as simple as that. I know I sound like
No. It's very simple. But let's
Yeah.
hope the Supreme Court gets to these issues quickly because the clock is ticking. In reality, the president only has like 2 years to work on this before midterms when nothing controversial is going to get done, and the clock is ticking on his 4-year term as well. Here's what I find frustrating and discouraging, Jay, is that I think we've got the greatest legal system on the planet, but with this politicization of judges, we're seeing a lack of faith in the judicial process today.
Yes. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. It's the best system on the planet, as you stated. Said differently, it's the worst system on the planet, but for all the others.
Right.
But I really do believe that there is forum shopping. They are shopping for judges, and both sides have done this. So it's not just exclusive to the left. It just happens to be right now. But this is why it's so important for our Supreme Court to recognize it. And oh, by the way, there's plenty of laws on the books that prohibit the jurisdiction that district judges can enjoin activities by the government. For instance, they limit it to the parties in the suit or the district in which the suit is filed. So in the Boasberg case, the Tren de Aragua case, it would be the 5 plaintiffs and any TDA members living and subject to removal that are living in D.C. Not these nationwide injunctions, which are really these sort of poor man class action suits that are sort of swooping in all of these people that may or may not exist and making it a nationwide injunction by the lowest level of federal judge in our system, seated somewhere other than Texas or New York in this case. And that's absurd, absolutely absurd that this is continuing. It really is up to Congress to fix that jurisdictional issue as well.
J-Town, former U.S. Attorney, Northern District of Alabama. Always great insight. I appreciate your time. And I got to mention, Alabama and Auburn both in the Sweet 16. How do your brackets look?
Oh, it's Auburn by 50 all the way, Scott.
Okay.
By 50. Yeah. Take it. Put it down now. Take the over, all of it. Yeah.
We're done here.
Thanks, Scott.
Roll Tide. See you, Jay.
See you, buddy.
And you can follow Jay on X at J-Town, Alabama. Giorgio Tsoukalos will join me in just a minute. Giorgio is the host, one of the co-hosts of Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. I love this show, exploring the ancient astronaut theory. And Ancient Aliens are going on tour, including to a few cities near us. This story just coming across this afternoon. The Ohio State football team, the Buckeyes, will visit the White House on April 14th. Ryan Day confirming this at his press conference earlier today.
And getting to visit.
Yeah, it's an honor to be invited. We were formally invited, and it's customary. And I remember growing up and watching the national championship teams go to the White House, and I always looked at that like, man, what an honor that would be. And so it's part of the celebration of our team. And I think the Eagles are maybe going before us, but I think our date is April 14th. Yep. So, looking forward to getting all that planned out.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are even going as well. The Chiefs that weren't able to visit the White House because of COVID that year. So a lot of championship teams visiting the White House. Maybe next year it will be my Alabama Crimson Tide. Okay, let's talk about aliens. Giorgio Tsoukalos joining me now on the Scott Sand Show podcast.
Hi, Scott. How are you? Good to see you.
Great to see you. And I mean this as a compliment. Probably not a week goes by where I don't use the aliens meme.
That thing grew organically, and I think I'm in good company if Arnold Schwarzenegger has his tagline, "I'll be back." Sylvester Stallone has his Rocky hands, so the fact that I have my aliens hands, I'm in good company.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have the Ancient Aliens tour coming back through the area with Akron and Wheeling and Brown County and Indiana, so many other tour dates. We'll get to that in a second, but I've got to ask, this was all over social media last week, these strange structures under the pyramids, these cylinders. You spent so much time on Ancient Aliens on the TV show talking about Egypt and the pyramids and ancient astronauts. What do you make of this story?
Yeah, isn't it exciting? This is a new radar LiDAR study that came out by an Italian team, and I always am one to push for independent verification.
but the preliminary news are quite exciting. And what's so fascinating too is that, the idea that the Giza Plateau was or is honeycombed, that there is an entire, Swiss cheese underneath the Giza Plateau is not something new. In fact, this was already established in the 1970s and in the 1960s, that the entire Giza Plateau is a honeycomb and that there are many multiple chambers underneath there. And so we always knew that there were structures. And, Christopher Dunn in the 1990s proposed in his book, The Giza Power Plant, that the entire Giza complex may have been some type of an energy-producing machine, which sounds crazy. But
it does sound crazy.
Yeah, but with Earth energies, you could potentially achieve something like that.
There are some people who say this looks like a nuclear reactor. That can't be possible, is it?
I'm not so sure about a nuclear reactor, but an energy-producing device that can use, the energy resources of the Earth, that's quite possible. And who knows if it's also connected to some of the other pyramids and it's some type of a network, because we still don't know everything that's below the ground, especially if you think that perhaps Earth has gone through some upheaval, some cataclysms where, the poles shifted. I mean, some people have proposed that the Earth has gone through pole shifts. So imagine the mayhem that would have caused, and imagine if there was a previous civilization, all that stuff would be somewhere under the soil or under the sand.
You and I have had conversations in the past about the ancient astronaut theory, and we may start to see some exciting news coming out of Congress as these UAP hearings continue. I mean, we've got testimony, and now one of the whistleblowers is on a congressional staff saying that we are in possession of non-human craft.
Yes, huge shout out to David Grush. What an American hero. It's truly amazing that since 2017, December 2017, whenever I would do these interviews, they would cue it off with the Twilight Zone music or the X-Files theme. And, which was always fine with me, but that has happened. That has stopped happening. So it's no longer happening that they play the Twilight Zone music and stuff like that. So, we live in very fascinating times. And David Grush, I mean, he really brought it to the forefront, and more power to him. And I wish him and his team all the courage and all the strength that they can get to keep pressing forward, because clearly they're hitting walls. And I say, head down, ram through the walls.
As the X-Files say, the truth is out there. We may start to unravel some of those truths. So the Ancient Aliens Live Tour, ancientalienslivetour.com is the website to get tickets and find out information. What do you do on this tour? You and our friend Nick Pope and others are speaking about the ancient astronaut theory.
Yeah, so it's a 90-minute roadshow, as I call it, where together with myself and Nick Pope, William Henry, and Jason Martell, we basically give you a 90-minute Ancient Aliens episode on stage, where we show you some of the smoking guns of the ancient astronaut theory, together with video clips, with pictures, and a Q&A discussion at the very end. And, if you're a fan of the show, come on down. It's a fun night out in the town for the whole family. In fact, even if you have some skeptics in your family, because I cannot tell you how many times a wife, drags their husband, or a husband drags their wife, and one of them is a skeptic. And after the show, they're like, I never knew anything about this, but this was very interesting. So, like I said, it's a fun night on the town for the whole family. So, and for your friends, and especially if you're a fan of Ancient Aliens. But even if you're not, come on down and check it out.
I am what I would consider to be an open-minded skeptic. I want to believe, as Fox Mulder said in the X-Files, but it seems to me like if there were ancient visitors, we would have had more evidence by now. And I know in Ancient Aliens, which I watch all the time, you go through the evidence that we may have. But it seems to me like sometimes the simplest explanation is that we are alone, or if we're not alone, we haven't exactly made contact yet. The only thing that most recently we started to get a lot more chatter about UAPs during the drone invasion of New Jersey. Do you think that may have been some sort of contact?
No, because the U.S. military has come forward 6 weeks ago and said all the drones are theirs, and I will listen to that. What has not been explained yet are the glowing orbs of light. There, the military in the same sentence or in the same statement has come forward. We know what the drones are, they're ours, but what these orbs of light are, we have no idea. And so that is what I'm after. I'm not after the stuff that's explainable. I'm after the stuff that's unexplainable, because some of that video footage that we have, you have these orbs of light that go from 10,000 feet to 85,000 feet in the blink of an eye. Now, as far as I know, I don't think that any material sciences exist yet or out in public that could withstand such accelerations and the stopping of from going 20,000 miles an hour to zero. I mean, anyone in there or any instrumentation in there would get smushed to a goo with these accelerations. So what is going on? And no, we have not been given all the answers.
I would agree with that. The government does need to be a little bit more transparent. Maybe we'll start to hear some of those answers very soon. The Ancient Aliens Live Tour, ancientalienslivetour.com. It's coming to the area, to Nashville, Indiana, Akron, and Wheeling, West Virginia, and several other cities as well. Giorgio, I'm a huge fan of yours. I love the TV show. Can't wait for the tour, because at the end of the day, it's got to be aliens.
That's the meme. And by the way, I never personally said that the aliens built the pyramids and stuff like that. The meme, it was us human beings who did it with the assistance, as they said. And there is a big difference. We've had teachers. That's all I'm saying.
Giorgio, great to have you on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Scott. Until next time.
Aliens. I really am low-key obsessed with ancient aliens. Don't judge me. Couple of stories to wrap us up for today. You ever just hang out in the bathroom at work for a while? Well, don't try it on your next flight. A 20-year-old from New Jersey now suing United Airlines. He claims a pilot yanked him out of a bathroom for taking too long. This happened back in January, flying home from a trip to Mexico with a friend. A flight attendant woke his friend up from a nap and told him to go check on him because he'd been in the bathroom for 20 minutes. The guy yelled through the door that he was fine, just constipated, so they left him alone. But then a pilot got involved after he still had not come out 10 minutes later. So half an hour total. I mean, if you're a guy, half an hour on the John is really not a big deal. You've got news to read, sports to look at, TikTok to scroll. It might take you a good half hour, and in some cases, that's 30 minutes of peace and quiet. According to the lawsuit, the pilot started screaming and demanding him to come out immediately, then broke the lock and opened the door on him. The guy's pants were down around his ankles, everything on full display. He says the pilot, flight attendants, several passengers all got a good view of it. He and his friend were handcuffed, escorted off the plane when it landed in Houston. Airport police put them in holding cells, but eventually released them without filing charges. They're both suing now, claiming that they were treated unfairly. They also claim the pilot talked about them being Jewish and made anti-Semitic remarks, which is a much bigger deal. A jury will decide if they deserve to get paid or not, and if so, how much. United, of course, declining to comment on this lawsuit. And finally, I put this picture up earlier. It's on my Facebook page if you follow the Scott Sands Show. It looks like the hot mugshot girl decided to stretch her 15 minutes of fame into a full half hour. She was arrested again yesterday, and yes, there is a new mugshot. You're just catching up on this story. She's 20 years old, a sorority girl at the University of Georgia. Her name is Lily Stewart. She went viral last week thanks to the mugshot she took after being arrested for speeding earlier this month. Police threw her in jail after she got pulled over once again, then again minutes later by the same cop for driving even faster. TMZ says she got arrested again early yesterday, but not for speeding this time. They charged her with loitering and obstructing an officer. Last I looked, they had not said exactly what she did, but it happened in Athens, where the University of Georgia is located. They booked her at 5:26 a.m., released on a $4,000 bond a few hours later. This new mugshot, not quite as flattering, but she's still pretty cute in it. She's in prison garb this time, and there's also a side profile shot of her. I got to be honest, if you look at this, and again, I'm not trying to shame anybody. I know she's young. She's in college. Sure, there was alcohol involved, most likely. She has some low-key crazy eyes happening, on the crazy hot spectrum. Crazy eyes are definitely there. That's the last story I'll leave you with today. Thanks for finding the podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, on Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, this Facebook page, X. You can find me literally anywhere. On X and TikTok, Scott Sands Media, Scott Sands on Instagram, The Scott Sands Show on Facebook, Scott Sands Media, I believe, on YouTube, and The Scott Sands Show on Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, all of the platforms. I'm having some trouble with Apple Podcasts, apparently. I hope to get that figured out. I was actually on the phone with tech support with Apple for almost 2 hours earlier trying to get that straightened out, and they still couldn't help me. It's a mess. Apple Podcast Connect is not the best platform, I'm learning. Anyway, that's my problem, not yours. Many thanks to my partners, RixaHealth.com. As you can see, down 100 pounds at RixaHealth.com. The GLPs, man, they definitely work. I'm trying to shed another 25 before the end of the summer. Thanks to 4GuysInARoof.com, The Extreme Roofer, Farnsworth Cocktail Bar, 3rd Street Cigar, Frame Chiropractic, The Art of Men's Grooming. If you need a haircut, check out their site, their Facebook page, and book an appointment today. Christy and the whole crew at the Art of Men's Grooming, great. Downstairs Whiskey Red Saloon at the Commodore Perry, Toledo Tech Loft, and, of course, Alp Nicotine Pouches. Alp Nicotine Pouches contain nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical, must be 21 or over. But if you want to try out a better, more flavorful, moisture nicotine pouch, a better time. It's Tucker Carlson's company. There's a link in the comments below that lets you get a 10% discount if you use my code to buy Alp pouches. Have a great night. New episode this week. We'll talk about Mud End's opening day here on the Scott Sands Show next.